This time the red. Yes, it is.
Oh dear.
Goes the Comet. Yes, Steve was saying, of course, that the airfield conditions deemed just that little bit potentially slippery to allow the Spitfire 5, the Sea Hurricane and the Avro 19 answer. Otherwise we have a very full programme and one including 1 or 2 bonuses. We get underway, as you've already been told. God save the king, you can see it reads, you'll see it all the better when it flies past in the other direction.
That's alright.
Yeah, so those 3 aircraft all flying the Union Jack, the Martlett, the DH-60X, which is returning to action this year after some season's absence, and David's sisters visiting Tiger Moth will be taking us through until just before 20, descending from the heavens with the Parachute Regiment's Red Devils free-fall display team. About 20 to 5 And then we have a real treat. If the weather permits, we're going to see a double slot from the Edwardians. Today we've got the Bristol Boxkite and Avro Triplane reproductions, and the genuine Blériot 11 and Deperdussin. Plus, in the same slot, the slightly later, remarkable indeed, English electric Wren.
Sometimes grab the headlines. These aeroplanes, the three of these are representative true British flying history. Ben, I know like me you are a passionate fan of these golden era aeroplanes.
Support of the Shuttleworth Veteran Aeroplane Society to join the Gull, which joined the fleet here at the end of 2013, and long-term collection stalwart, the Comet. In the 1937 King's Cup in the hands of Ken Waller, finishing in 12th position.
And the white aircraft on the port wing of the DH-88 Comet, the Percival Gull, another aeroplane linked inextricably with British aviation history. It was the aeroplane which won the King's Cup in 1938, flown by
As for the Hawk Speed 6, the rightmost of the three aircraft as we look at them now, its King's Cup plane achieved the fastest outline speed in the King's Cup with the Hawk Speed 6 between 1958 and 64 to win outright.
By the name of Roger Mills. Responsible for maintaining it in its excellent condition, and in 2018 Roger decided to sell the aeroplane and the Shuttleworth collection became its custodian. Roger in his day job was a Concorde captain. Just 2 weeks after this Hawk Speed 6 made its maiden flight in June 1935, Louis Fonteth won the Le Mans 24-hour race for Lagonda alongside his co-driver Johnny Hindmarsh. That was his retirement from motor racing. He then turned exclusively to air racing. The aircraft as it appeared at the time of the Cape record. Henshaw's feat in setting that London to Cape Town record was quite extraordinary when you consider the very rudimentary equipment at his disposal.
and the only thing that really goes is the width of the cowling. But again, you'll hear that crackle from the exhaust as the Hawkspeed 6 comes through, and the sound of that 200 horsepower.
All of them somewhat different. The third and final one was the M2U model, open cockpit with a 220 horsepower Gypsy 6R engine optimised for racing. Hawkspeed 6, with the cockpit covered by a small coupe top, the machine is admirable for those who wish to get about quickly on business, but want the advantage of an open machine with a cockpit which can be closed at will. I'm not sure it was ever perhaps the most practical proposition for the businessman, rather more of a bespoke racer, but nonetheless, splendid.
But thank you personally for these wide short. And I'll be controversial here in saying this is probably
as one of 3 Comets that took part in the 1934 McRobertson International Air Race from the then newly opened RAF Milton Hall in Suffolk to Melbourne, Australia. But also many notable flights after that. Kirby Green set a new London to Cape Town record, which would soon be beaten by the Mew Gull. As one of 3 Comets that took part in the 1934 McRobertson International Air Race from the then newly opened RAF Milton Hall in Suffolk to Melbourne, Australia. But also many notable flights. Remains unbeaten even now.
Is this one of the most historic aeroplanes in the Shuttleworth collection? It's also, it's got to be said, one of the more demanding to fly. What it doesn't have is good slow speed handling.
Along with Tom Campbell Black, formed the crew that flew this aircraft from Milton Hall to Melbourne in 1934, told a BBC reporter before the start that he'd never flown a twin-engined aeroplane before he took the controls of Grosvenor House.
Trying to get between the wings.
And a superbly executed wheeler landing there, keeping the weight on the undercarriage till the very last minute, and then allowing the tail skid to bring the aeroplane to a standstill.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. Charlie
since then, the Comet has flown in the vast majority of displays here. Its attraction never diminishes. Apart from Dodge in the Comet, we had Paul Stone, our current chief pilot, with the Hawkspeed 6, and it was Mark Sharp handling the Gull.
Contact. Contact. Off. Off. Contact. Contact. Off. Off. Contact. Contact.
Bristol F2b Fighter. Shuttleworth collection, now the only one airworthy in the UK. For a brief, blissful time in 2006, we had 3. The other 2 were sold overseas, making the value of this one all the greater as a member of the Shuttleworth collection.
And of course I'm using the crosswind runway here, or the cross runway, which is actually into wind at the moment, and as well as minimising the need for the crosswind, again it's avoiding cutting up the grass as the Bristol Fighter rolls gently to a standstill. No brakes of course, fixed tail skid, and the minimum of wear and tear on the grass. Unlimited Royal connections, that is the Royal Chipmunk, the Havilland Chipmunk, in which King Charles III actually learned to fly, gained his first solo, and indeed even got his pilot's certificate.
Paul Shakespeare, meanwhile, taxiing the Bristol Fighter back, the Luñák.
We'll talk a little bit more about the glider later on. A fully aerobatic glider, and you'll see the aircraft flying very, very sportingly indeed in a moment. Supercub with its 150 250 horsepower engine, the ideal tow shift, to get the glider off the ground and climb to altitude. Unique to this aeroplane, which was illuminated when His Royal Highness, as he was then, was flying. Keep well away.
This aeroplane indeed started out as purely an ordinary Chipmunk, built in 1952 at the Havilland factory at Harden, near Chester, and it had a host of different service assignments up until 1960. At that point, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince William of Gloucester, and Prince Michael of Kent all required flying training. Tanks were all replaced, and it was painted in this bright red scheme.
The Chipmunk was taken on charge in 1961, and that beacon has forever been nicknamed the Parrot.
Actually, it's quite interesting. It's getting one or two nicknames. The Parrot was one I wrote actually was just up the road here, where it was based for many years, at which point it was known as Noddy. And I think Noddy is a great name for that aeroplane. But it's as agile as any other de Havilland Chipmunk. It's flown by a syndicate of very enthusiastic owners, now based here at Old Warden. It made its move when Henlow closed, so literally just a few miles down the road. And it's now based
When the training loses its licence, and his RAF
awarded to members of the University Air Squadron. The next day, 4th of August 1968, the aircraft was flown from Tangmere back to its base at Benson. The job of instructing Prince Charles was entrusted to squadron leader, later Group Captain Philip Pinney.
He instructed our now King during his first 2.5 years at the University of Cambridge while he was studying at Trinity College.
That because the crosswind was out of limits at Oakington.
story from the training, which was told by Philip Penny, where they did a cross-country flight over airfield, at which point the red carpet was immediately hustled out from His Royal Highness. Philip Penny didn't have any ID on him.
University College of Wales in Aberystwyth, now Aberystwyth University, also from Benson and elsewhere during the university's summer holidays.
The King also became a very accomplished rotary wing pilot and served an active tour on the Westland Wessex. So he was and is an accomplished aviator.
See a jet provost in today's display. Unfortunately, all of the available examples are suffering unserviceability like ours. So.
Additional air brake, very natty and stylish approach, and kick straight just to land, and that is how you land a Chipmunk.
Very nicely flown by Bob Brinkley,
one of the syndicate members owns this aeroplane.
And I can hear it and I can see it from the right, ladies and gentlemen, the Lancaster.
get the helicopter then?
Circuits and bumps, what you're doing is you're keeping the wing down into wind, you're aiming to position it in a 3-point attitude with the tail skid and the wheels touching at about the same time. Gentle pull back on the stick and it descends gracefully. Nicely done.
And special mention there for the man at the control, because it was Richard Crockett who is the Shuttle Collection's new apprentice pilot for this season.
Essentially the naval one for the Royal Navy and the French Navy with a wheeled undercarriage, and the battlefield helicopter for the British Army Air Corps as here with skids, though later on the use of a wheeled undercarriage on the cancelled Lynx 3 project led to the later Lynx Mk.IIIA for the Army Air Corps also being equipped with a wheeled undercarriage.
I could be wearing an exercise shirt.
Yes, the Westland Lynx is probably one of the most successful British helicopters designed. The rotor tips for doing that point.
It was then that it was acquired by Graham Hinckley, who's owned many historic helicopter and fixed-wing types. He intended to use it as a static showpiece in his garden.
Staying very quiet there is obviously the same sound of another Lynx, which is the Armstrong Siddeley Lynx engine in front.
Before Christmas 2021, and its first model was February 2022. This is, I say,
Sat in the back seat of that Swordfish, or
in the back seat, with a couple of Vickers gallons, a pair of Vickers gas operators. So, although I had to do force all those things, basically I wasn't allowed to use them.
that was nearly 80 years ago. That was 80 years ago. I understand you're still full of divorce. Well, we'll get back to David in just a moment. David, I've got to say, is incredibly spry, soon to be centenarian. But your role was as a I am absolutely sure you did. It's a privilege to meet you, David, and
one of the ancestor airlines, which is in the heritage of the airlines. Mk.IIIA wanted an aircraft that with Peter Kozagorin in command. As you will have noticed, our red, white and blue formation, albeit taxiing out in the order white, blue and red, all flying Union Jacks. An aircraft that initially went under a designation to conjure with in the annals of British military aviation, TSR-2, albeit in this instance TSR standing for Torpedo Spotter Reconnaissance. This following on from an earlier private venture design, the TSR-1, the Navy Wings, Fairey Swordfish 1. By the time war broke out, the Swordfish was famously outmoded.
Primary role for many Swordfish was protecting the convoys, bringing food and supplies to the European theatre from America. And by keeping the submarines under the water, they were Speaking earlier to David, we were talking about the camp, the civilian armed merchantmen, which they used to fly from a small deck on top of a merchant ship carrying supplies. That was the length they had available to land the Swordfish on.
Telegraphy radio set and the .303-inch Lewis machine gun. The observer would be sat in the centre cockpit, performing navigational duties.
And indeed, the navigator observer was perhaps the most important person to be on the Fairey Swordfish.
Aircraft like this effectively put the Italian fleet out of action for the remainder of the war. There was the chase after the German battleship Bismarck, during which a Swordfish put a torpedo through the much feared vessel's steering gear, after which the home fleet sank it with gunfire. And then there was what became known as the Channel Dash, a mere 6 Swordfish attempting to stop the German destroyers Prinz Eugen, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau from moving through the English Channel from Brest in France to Wilhelmshaven in Germany. Ships that were very heavily defended by destroyers, E-boats and aircraft. All 6 Swordfish were shot down. their commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, being awarded the Victoria Cross for his heroism during those actions.
And the southern Martlett get airborne for a red, white and blue formation. 40 Union Jack, quite likely this return.
Our red, white and blue formation is coronation weekend. All trains Union flag, about to fly past.
Stinson making their way back to Yeovilton. As you say, it's a steady, probably 80-knot cruise with the Swordfish these days. Distracted by David saluting with his friend's naval hat. His crewmates in the Swordfish as they taxi to depart. Company at that time was Southern Aircraft, but surely. Sounds like it indeed. The last time he spoke on the radio was when he crossed the English Channel because he refused to speak French. It was the most
anniversary of the famous flight by Burt Winkler, record-breaking flight with an Avro avian. Set off from Dublin.
Notice a Welsh dragon itself underway to the Gull bandits. I'm glad to say the Bristol Pegasus is just that little bit quieter, as indeed. In the display Mercury Magic, but I think we're going to be joined by a Pegasus as well, and again what a wonderful tribute to the wonderful aero engines built down in Bristol by the Bristol Aeroplane Company.
Oh, I'd love to Gladiator.
RAF reservists flying Eastern Northumberland crew in the mess. And the German pilot stood up and in perfect English toasted the Gloster Gladiator pilot, saying, "I've just been shot down by a solicitor in the Bible." Gloster Gladiator was developed from the Gloster Gauntlet with a cantilever undercarriage. They stayed on the RAF front line until 1941. They had an active part in the Norwegian and Middle Eastern campaigns in the early to midpoint of the Second World War. Of course, there was the famous Faith, Hope and Charity Gloster Gladiators in the defence of Malta. This aeroplane was actually preserved by the Gloucester Aircraft Company, who donated it to the collection in 1960. Just behind the engine cowling, underneath the cockpit canopy, you'll see the two machine gun installations. The reason for that was that the Air Ministry at the time still demanded that the pilot should be able to clear any block breaches. When the monoplane fighters came along a couple of years later, displaying this aircraft as safety. Interestingly, when the aeroplane replaced the Gloster Gauntlet, a lot of pilots actually bemoaned the fact it had an enclosed canopy, saying that it made them isolated from flying. And you see today, the aeroplane's quite often flown with the canopy slid back. Aircraft to be adopted by the RAF. And here indeed in front of us now is an example of the Westland Lysander, the Mk.IIIA model. This representing what was the first monoplane type to serve with RAF Army Cooperation Command, replacing two Hawker biplanes, the Audax and the Hector. Tote pair of forward-firing .303 machine guns. on the wings to remove the need to side spin the aircraft, reduce landing speed as well. There's one landing again. Capacity by a geared supercharger. It was also one of the very first engines to take advantage of the new 100 octane leaded aviation. Well, the Bristol Mercury engine, interestingly, was also used overseas, because as well as the 21,000 engines produced by Bristol's, a number were built by P.Z.L. in Poland and Volta in the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia as it was then. Post-war, the engines are thought to have formed the basis for the design. Cylinder radial, which is still used to this day in the Yak 52 trainer. To absorb the landing. Bristol Fighter, as I mentioned a moment ago, powered by a 275 horsepower Rolls-Royce Falcon 3, and I think I am correct in saying this is the oldest flying Rolls-Royce engine in the world. A very robust engine, very strong engine, and also not just listen to the engine note, listen for the wind in the wires, because the Bristol Fighter is known, as somebody referred to as, humming like an harp. The Bristol Fighter departs. Beautifully flown display in the Lysander by and Jean-Michel Nunn was the pilot of our Gladiator for this display.
Especially in comparison with other two-seaters of its time. And also to the wide field of fire that the observer enjoyed. The F2b was thus able to switch rapidly in the course of a mission from offence to defence and vice versa, and it made it into a much feared opponent. And that much was borne out by the success of many pilots, but in particular the leading Bristol.
As well as being a respected adversary for its opponents, it was actually very much loved by its pilots. It can't be described as a light aeroplane to fly, but a little bit recalcitrant on the Avro 5OK front there, the normal burst back to full power when the rotary engine comes on. Okay, it didn't happen in the customary manner, so he can clear the side of the runway. Sopwith Triplane. First flew in May 1960, known as the Tripan. It was popular in mostly by the Royal Naval Air Service.
And it was the first triplane design to go into military action. They chose this configuration especially for reasons of manoeuvrability.
Configuration. The Harry Hawker actually did multiple loops on his maiden flight in the aircraft. Somebody said it looked like something falling down a flight of stairs.
And just over a fortnight later, it was deemed ready to begin evaluation by the Royal Naval Air Service. And by the end of June, remember it had only just flown the previous month, there's a very definite connection with the collection here, because the Clayton and Shuttleworth company in Lincoln and it was that great polymath of vintage aviation, Stu Goldspink, flying it for us today, a man who from one weekend to the next can be seen at the controls of the most enormous variety of vintage aeroplanes across the British display circuit.
Rapidly realised under the armistice that it wasn't forbidden. It was a good way for pilot training to be undertaken. And this design, the Schneider SG-38, was a development of an earlier rider called the Zogling, and has shock-absorbed ski amongst other detailed improvements. But it is an open thrust framework with a very basic without doubt one of the longest, the most produced aircraft ever.
Flying from two of the interplane struts, can we see the Ukrainian flag. I mentioned earlier how the design began the Fairey Swordfish. It was known as TSR-2 designation, rather better known later in the history of aviation. What we now regularly refer to as the Polikarpov Po-2 was not known as such until 1944, when its designer Mk.IIIA Polikarpov died. Prior to that, it had been around since 1937, and was known as Po-2. This in myriad roles. They were used for agricultural purposes. They were used as air ambulances, passenger transports even, with an enclosed cabin. During what the Soviets referred to
it wore in the 9-collar roll, and that definitely knocks it.
This aircraft has a very, very lengthy and worldwide history. It was sold on from Slovenia to a gentleman called Pat Donovan and shipped to Seattle where restoration was begun. Then it was taken to New Zealand in 2000 and subsequently in 2004 came to the UK when it was purchased by the Shuttleworth collection in 2004 and the comprehensive restoration work began. It flew for the first time with the collection on the 10th of January 2011
period comedy called The Slow Pacer in the Sky, which established this aircraft's considerable legend in the USSR, and also the belief that it was flown largely by female crews. Alone were in themselves outstanding. The women pilots flew a total of 23,672 wartime missions and dropped more than 3,000 tons of bombs on the enemy. 23 women who belonged to that regiment were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union.
When you think of the conditions that they were operating in, these achievements are even more worthy of note. It wasn't just in World War II that this aircraft won its spurs, because during the Korean War from 1950 to 53, the North Korean People's Air Force employed the Po-2 as a night intruder, taking advantage of
4 others, and this an aircraft that had been designed back in the 1920s.
And it very much is a 1920s aeroplane. The fact that it stayed in service into even the 1970s in some areas as hot sprayers and light transport aircraft.
Glider tugs as well, yeah.
I actually have a lovely photograph at home of 3 of those SG-38 And you can see what I refer to as a vertiginous position in the pilot's seat of the primary. It's rare that primaries in their day ever went this high. The primary was designed as a primary trainer for gliding. And in Germany and later in Britain, this is actually a British example built by the furniture maker Elliot of Newbury, otherwise known as an Eon. And these were used in the days before dual instruction was available for glider pilots, and from the 1930s into even the 1950s. You did your initial flights at low level in one of these primary gliders. They can thermal. They're not very good at going into the wind because they've only got a thermaling speed of about 28 miles an hour. But the glider, as you can see, can float along. It's got about a 1 in 8 or 1 in 7 glide angle, so it glides about the same as a Piper Cub with the engine off. But it was initially you would do ground slides, sliding along the ground, and in fact you could even put this aircraft on a pedestal, a gimbal, which would actually let you train using the controls pointing the aircraft into wind. Like all gliders, you fly to judge the landing and fly with a little bit of surplus of speed, because the speed is your power effectively. And as we saw earlier with Graham Saw, you can actually judge it perfectly and almost roll it to the stop where you want it. This is a little bit more approximate, But even so, you watch out again for the energy management here with the glider, turning downwind, turning now into wind, with a view to bringing it safely back onto the airfield and onto the runway. Squeezer engine and first flew in November 16. Only 77 of these were built before the engine was replaced by the geared 200 horsepower engine to create the SE5A. They continued in service right up to the end of the war, with 5,265 being built. And it wasn't just used by the Royal Air Force, it formed the basis of the American flight detachments which arrived in France in 1918. Used over the Western Front. The SE5A, late World War I, survived actually into squadron service into the 1920s and was also used by private owners. The Sopwith Pup really was the aeroplane that cemented the role of the Sopwith Scout as a squadron aircraft. It's light, it's agile, it's powered by an 80 horsepower Wren 9-cylinder rotary engine with a single Vickers K machine gun. After the war by Major Jack Savage for his skywriting business. If you go to the Science Museum in London, up on the top floor, you'll actually see in the aircraft hall there the aircraft's sister aircraft still in its skywriting configuration, with an extended pipe from the exhaust pipe to the tail of the aircraft, into which was poured hot oil into the hot exhaust to allow it to generate white smoke. This aircraft was found suspended from the roof of Armstrong Whitney's flight shed at Whitby in 1955 and was restored for the collection by staff and apprentices at RAE Farnborough. It's been flying on and off now with overhauls on a regular basis since 1959. Sopwith Pup actually has an even longer Shuttleworth collection. She's got her original registration, EBKY, and she carries the colours of a ship-bomb pub which served on HMS Max.
What the hell's that? Break, I reckon. Oh.
If the cross is to be folded in any way into the shape of an L, this will indicate to the jump master that the landing area is dangerous and they shouldn't jump to death. So I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but there's 3 canopies on the left-hand side. What these are trying to create what we call a crew formation. So canopy at the rear is going to crash into the back of the canopy on top, and then from there they'll attach together by locking their legs in between the lines of one another, and then they'll climb down so that they're face to face, and I believe they're going to attach at the hip and create what we call a canty formation. This is where 2 people sitting on top of the 3rd canopy on either side of it in the shape of a T. Also right up at the top on the right hand side, I don't know if you can see it, but we've got a 2,000 square foot Union Jack flag. So our first man coming down towards the ground now. This is our jump master for today, Corporal Wayne Shorthouse. Big round of applause for Shorty. So our crew formation for today is 3-way. We've got Lance Corporal Cameron Clark, Corporal Henry Mole and Sergeant Nathan Fisher. Next up we've got our team cameraman, Corporal Ollie Goss. And jumping big flag today, we have Corporal Stephen Hanley. And the 2 jumping smaller flags we have and that last flag down there was Private Max Tutor.
Which is currently, as you may have seen in the workshops, having its wings recovered. David Bury.
also the front elevator of the Boxkite as it heads towards you. You can see the pilot making pitch adjustments all the time by the elevator. Meanwhile, the tailplane is actually generating lift to help support the wind. It doesn't really know whether it's hot or cold, and that's when you get the problem sometimes starting an engine of this nature. Take off well on the Boxkite, and once again for that famous Boxkite levitation. Said, to the astonishment of beholders, who had taken up prone positions on the ground in order to detect the first glimmer of daylight between the grass and the wheels. Such was the excitement engendered by seeing one of these newfangled flying machines for the first time. Before that design had even been fully tested, Sir George White had authorised the construction of a further 20 Boxkites. They were sold as far afield as South Africa, India and Russia. I think that is what is termed a greaser. Absolutely beautiful. These aircraft were responsible in the pioneering days of British aviation for many firsts. They were used for early military experiments over Salisbury Plain. They were also used extensively by Bristol's own flying school for pilot training, such that by the time World War I broke out in 1914, they were pilots of the Bristol as the Boxkite shuts down, perhaps a round of applause both for Stu Goldsmith on the Boxkite and Willie Hackett in the triplane. Thank you very much indeed, and here it is, on the roll, an English Electric Wren, well, that's on the 100 years later.
He's cutting the grass off again.
Oh, we'll see. A few years ago, the only way we got off the ground here was by launching it with a bungee. Let's see whether we can get it airborne today. Once you get clear of the ground, you'll lose the drag off the still wet grass. And that would actually help. So let's see whether we get the flying to go.
This is a very sensitive operation, made a little easier in recent times by some work done on the ABC power plant a few years ago, since when it's been able to perform rather fuller flights than had hitherto been the case.
I suspect we might have a repositioning of the aeroplane for a second.
There's people up there.
Not that it will take very long to stop them. I think we will get the Wren into the air. The good news is that wind does appear to be dropping very slightly. We had some thermals come through earlier on, generated by the differences in temperature on the ground, and certainly with these wet patches on the ground. There is a damp patch about here, and it's amazing how much a little bit of moisture and soft ground will slow an aeroplane with this marginal performance. And with a bit of luck, he's going to get onto the diagram and get a little bit of acceleration this time, and you never know. Only when you blow hard, you never know, a bit of wind over the wings might help it.
If it does take off, it's yours.
Which creates some interesting moments on the crosswind.
Yeah, I can feel it off.
It seems to go faster in this time. Yeah, because it's downhill. Downhill, yeah.
Well, it's looking a little bit more inspired down here this time, the Wren. Now, is he going to have the confidence of keeping it going straight ahead and keeping it climbing?
Well, that was, as ever, a great pleasure. Well done to Richard Crockett at the controls of the Wren.